What would you do if you left your family's land for a year, only to return and find someone else had taken it over, profiting from it as if it were theirs? Ethan Caldwell gripped the steering wheel of his truck as he navigated the winding forest road, the scent of pine and damp earth filling the cab. This was it, his sanctuary, his inheritance, the land his grandfather had spent a lifetime tending. 30 sprawling acres of woodland, untouched by time, a place where the hum of the city faded into the rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds. It was supposed to be his fresh start, a return to his roots after years of being tethered to a high-stress tech job in Seattle. His grandfather, Henry Caldwell, had always spoken about this land with reverence, calling it a place of peace, a legacy worth protecting. Ethan had grown up visiting these woods, learning the names of trees, following the trails his grandfather had carved decades ago. The house, a sturdy but weathered ranch-style home near the stream, was old but held memories in its walls. It needed work, but Ethan had always seen its potential. A year ago, life had pulled him away. His job had been demanding, and time had slipped through his fingers. But now, with a remote position allowing him more freedom, he was finally coming home. He imagined the quiet mornings he'd spend here, coffee in hand, watching the mist rise from the stream. No deadlines, no constant notifications, just him and the land his family had cherished for generations. As he pulled into the long dirt driveway, the house came into view. The cedar siding, once rich and golden, had faded to a dull gray. The roof showed the scars of time, shingles missing in places. But that was nothing a little hard work couldn't fix. He stepped out of the truck, inhaling deeply, savoring the crisp mountain air. This was home. For the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into the work. He repaired the roof, repainted the walls, replaced rotting floorboards. Each day, as he wiped the sweat from his brow, he felt something deep inside him settling, like he was finally where he belonged. The land seemed to welcome him back, too. Birds flitted between the trees, deer wandered near the meadow at dusk, and the gentle murmur of the stream was a constant companion. But the land was vast, and he hadn't yet explored all of it since his return. That thought gnawed at him, especially as he noticed something strange, deep tire tracks on the dirt road leading into the trees, in a direction no one should be driving. His grandfather had always been clear, this land stretched far beyond the house, marked by boundary stakes that had stood for decades. No one else had any claim to it. Yet these tracks suggested otherwise. Curious and slightly unsettled, Ethan decided to take a ride out deeper into the property, bringing along an old map his father had once shown him, the one with clear orange boundary lines. He loaded up his ATV, strapped on his gear, and revved the engine. The tires kicked up dust as he sped toward the tree line, heart pounding with anticipation. What he didn't know was that beyond those trees, past the meadow and into the deeper woods, his sanctuary had already been taken. Ethan maneuvered his ATV through the winding trails, the cool forest air rushing past him as he ventured deeper into his land. He hadn't been this far out since his return, and with every turn, a sense of unease settled in his chest. The trees here were thicker, their shadows stretching long across the uneven terrain. The deeper he rode, the more out of place those tire tracks felt. No one should have been driving out this way. Then he saw it. At first, it didn't register. The forest had always been dense, uninterrupted. But now, through the trees, a sliver of something unnatural gleamed in the afternoon light. He slowed the ATV, his pulse quickening as he pushed forward. The trees suddenly thinned, giving way to a modern, two-story cottage. Ethan's stomach lurched. The cottage sat in a neatly cleared clearing, complete with a freshly painted deck, manicured lawn, and gravel driveway. A small wooden fence lined the perimeter, marking what someone clearly thought was private property. His property. But that wasn't all. Beyond the first cottage, he could see more, 5 in total, each nestled comfortably into what had once been untouched land. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a random hunting cabin or some illegal squatters. This was a full-blown vacation rental retreat. His fingers tightened around the handlebars as he rode closer. A sign near the largest cottage read in bold, elegant letters, "Blue Pines Retreat, Luxury Getaways in the Heart of Nature." Ethan's vision blurred with rage. This couldn't be real. Someone had taken his family's land and turned it into a profit-making business, and they had done it without him knowing. He forced himself to breathe, to think. Who? How? And for how long? Movement near one of the cottages caught his attention. A couple lounged by a pool. Someone had installed a damn pool out here. The man stretched lazily in a deck chair while the woman laughed, dipping her feet in the water. They looked like they were on an all-inclusive resort, blissfully unaware that they were sitting in the middle of stolen property. Ethan pulled up to the fence, cutting the engine. The sudden silence made the couple glance up. "Excuse me," Ethan called, keeping his voice level despite the fire in his gut. The man smiled, assuming Ethan was part of the retreat staff. "Hey there. We just got here last night. This place is incredible, so peaceful, so private. Best rental we've ever booked." Rental. The word hit like a slap. "Yeah?" Ethan said slowly. "Mind if I ask who you booked it through?" "Sure. A woman named Karen runs the place. Super professional. She handled everything for us, gave us all the details, even a list of the best local spots to check out." "You work for her?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "Of course. Karen." He'd met her once, a year ago, when he first came back to visit before moving permanently. She'd been friendly, overly so, gushing about how beautiful his land was, asking about his plans. He had thought nothing of it then. Now he knew better. He pulled out his phone, swallowing down the rising fury as the couple happily gave him Karen's contact information. With shaking hands, he dialed the number. A cheerful voice answered on the third ring. "This is Karen. Which cottage are you interested in?" Ethan gritted his teeth. She really thought she could get away with this. "I'd like to discuss the cottages," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Can we meet in a couple of days? I want to see them in more detail before I make any decisions." Karen didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. I'd love to give you a tour. Just let me know when." Ethan ended the call, his grip on the phone tight enough to crack it. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the cottages, the fences, the landscaping, the pools, all of it a blatant, audacious theft. Over the next 2 days, Ethan worked methodically. He hired a surveyor to confirm the boundary lines and brought in a real estate attorney, Rachel Monroe, to start building a case. The results came back exactly as expected. Every single cottage sat on Ethan's land. Karen hadn't just encroached. She had taken everything. By the time the day of their meeting arrived, Ethan was ready. Not just with the truth, but with something even stronger, proof. Ethan arrived at Blue Pines Retreat a few minutes early, parking his truck just outside the gravel path that led to the largest cottage. The place was pristine, almost as if it had been built for a high-end resort rather than sitting on land that had belonged to his family for generations. The sheer arrogance of it all made his blood boil. He had grown up exploring these woods, running across these fields as a child, while Karen had waltzed in and turned his inheritance into her personal cash cow. A sleek black SUV pulled up a moment later, the door swinging open with practiced ease. Karen stepped out, dressed in a fitted blazer, her blonde hair styled in waves that screamed wealth and control. She radiated confidence, but the moment she spotted Ethan, a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "Ethan," she greeted him with a dazzling smile, as if she wasn't trespassing on his land, renting out homes she had no right to build. "I wasn't expecting you to be my client. What a small world." He kept his stance firm, his hands in his pockets to keep from clenching them into fists. Yeah, small world, he said coolly. Figured I'd check out the place, since it's on my land. Karen's expression barely faltered. Oh, Ethan, I think there's been some misunderstanding, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I actually own this section of the property. It was legally transferred over to me last year. I have the paperwork to prove it. Ethan didn't so much as blink. He already knew she was lying. Great, he said, feigning interest. I'd love to see those documents. Karen's confidence flickered for half a second before she quickly covered it with another practiced smile. Of course. I'll send them over. No need, Ethan said, pulling out a folder from under his arm. I already had my attorney check the county records. Turns out there's no such transfer. You don't own a single inch of this land, Karen. And yet here you are, renting it out like you built it yourself. Her lips pressed into a tight line, but she didn't drop the act. Instead, she let out a light laugh. Ethan, let's not make this ugly. We can talk like adults. Oh, I'm talking, he said. I'm telling you to shut this whole operation down. You have 14 days to remove everything before I take legal action. Karen folded her arms, her polished nails tapping against the sleeve of her blazer. You think you can scare me with a fake deadline? She scoffed. I've been in this business a long time, Ethan. I know how this works. If you file a lawsuit, it'll take months, years, even, to get through court. And in the meantime? She gestured around the cottages. This place will keep making money. Ethan had to stop himself from snapping right then and there. She wasn't just stealing from him, she was daring him to try and stop her. You're welcome to sue, she continued, adjusting her blazer. But I wouldn't recommend it. Lawsuits are expensive. And since I have ownership documents. Fake ownership documents, Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. Karen gave a small, knowing smirk. They won't look fake in court. Ethan exhaled slowly, reining in his frustration. She had planned this out. She knew exactly what she was doing. Well, you can test that theory, he said, stepping closer. Because I'm not just suing you, I'm pressing criminal charges for trespassing and fraud. And I've already filed a report with the county. So get ready, Karen. Your little rental empire. It's about to burn to the ground. For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed her face. But it didn't last long. She gave a small shrug, tilting her head in mock pity. All right, Ethan. You want to do this the hard way? Fine. But you're going to regret it. And with that, she turned, striding back toward her SUV like she hadn't just committed grand-scale property theft. Ethan didn't move as she drove off, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. She was right about one thing, this wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be war. 2 days later, Ethan's attorney, Rachel Monroe, called him with an update that made his stomach drop. She's playing dirty, Rachel said, voice clipped. Karen just filed a restraining order against you. Claims you threatened her during your meeting. Ethan gritted his teeth. Are you serious? Dead serious. It's temporary for now, but if it gets approved, it'll keep you off your own land until we get a hearing. She's trying to flip the narrative, make you look like the aggressor while she plays the victim. Ethan could barely breathe from the frustration. How the hell is she getting away with this? She's smart, Rachel admitted. She knows how to drag this out. The longer she stalls, the more money she makes from those cottages. And now she's rallying the town against you. Ethan stilled. What do you mean? Rachel let out a slow breath. She took out a full-page ad in the local paper this morning. Claimed you're an out-of-town developer, trying to shut down a beloved community retreat. She's framing herself as the underdog. The locals are eating it up. Some businesses are already refusing to work with us. Ethan felt his stomach turn. He had expected Karen to fight back. He hadn't expected her to turn the entire town against him. He had to act fast, before she buried him in lies. The situation was spiraling faster than Ethan had anticipated. He knew Karen was manipulative, but this level of deceit was beyond anything he had prepared for. Not only had she stolen his land and profited from it, but now she had turned the town against him, framed him as the villain, and used legal loopholes to stall his case. If he didn't find a way to outmaneuver her, she was going to bury him in lies before he even set foot in court. Rachel worked tirelessly, filing motions to counter the restraining order and expose Karen's fraudulent documents. But before they could gain any traction, Karen made her boldest move yet. She just sold the cottages, Rachel told Ethan over the phone, her tone clipped with frustration. Ethan froze. What? She sold all 5 cottages to private buyers, people who think they're getting a legitimate investment. She's trying to make this mess even more complicated before the court can shut her down. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of his porch. This was a calculated move. Karen knew she was losing, so she was dragging more people into the fight, hoping that if enough money and outside interests were involved, Ethan wouldn't be able to take back what was his without facing multiple lawsuits. Sure enough, 2 days later, a man showed up at Ethan's property, arms crossed, demanding to know why Ethan was trying to steal his land. "This lot belongs to me now," the man, a real estate investor named Jeff Carter, said, waving a freshly signed deed in Ethan's face. "I paid cash. If you have a problem, take it up with my attorney." Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. That land wasn't Karen's to sell. Jeff scoffed. "Well, I have paperwork that says otherwise." The situation escalated quickly. Within a week, multiple buyers had filed complaints against Ethan, claiming that he was trying to take back land he had already sold. Some even threatened to sue him for interfering with their investments. Karen had done it. She had turned Ethan's fight into an even bigger legal mess, buying herself more time. But Ethan wasn't going to let her win. With Rachel's help, he tracked down the fraudulent sales contracts and filed an emergency injunction to freeze all property transactions related to the cottages. The court agreed, temporarily blocking all sales and rentals until ownership was resolved. That should have been the final nail in Karen's coffin. But instead, she went one step further. 1 week before the court date, Ethan received a summons from Karen's attorney. "She's suing you for harassment and defamation," Rachel said, sounding more pissed off than usual. Ethan barked out a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "She's suing me? For defamation? After everything she's done?" "She's trying to delay the inevitable," Rachel said. "She knows she's losing. If she drags you into another lawsuit, it'll slow down the trial for months. She's banking on the idea that you'll settle instead of fighting it out in court." Ethan exhaled slowly. Well, she's dead wrong. But Karen wasn't finished. 2 days later, Ethan came home to find his front door hanging off its hinges. Inside, furniture was overturned, drawers ransacked, and glass shattered across the floor. Nothing of value had been stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Ethan gritted his teeth and pulled up the security footage from the camera he had installed weeks ago. The screen flickered to life, showing a black SUV pulling up to his house in the dead of night. 2 figures stepped out, their faces covered, and within minutes, they were smashing his windows, kicking in his door, and tearing through his belongings. Then, as they left, one of them turned toward the camera. For a brief second, just before he got into the SUV, the angle caught the license plate. Ethan wasted no time. He forwarded the footage to the police, and within hours, they tracked down the vehicle and arrested one of the vandals. Under questioning, the suspect cracked immediately. Karen had paid him. She had hired people to destroy Ethan's home, hoping to intimidate him into backing off. But instead, she had just given him exactly what he needed, evidence that she had crossed the line into criminal territory. Rachel called the next morning, and this time, she sounded thrilled. "She's done," she said. "Between the fraudulent sales, the fake restraining order, and now this? Karen's not just looking at civil penalties anymore. She's looking at actual jail time." Ethan felt a rush of satisfaction for the first time in weeks. She had tried to break him. But now, she was about to break herself. The courtroom was packed on the day the final ruling came down. Ethan sat calmly as the judge delivered the verdict, but inside, his heart pounded. Months of battles, of lies, of watching Karen manipulate the system, it was all about to end. The judge's decision was swift and brutal. Karen was found guilty of fraud, property theft, falsifying legal documents, and orchestrating an act of vandalism. The cottages, all 5 of them, were declared illegally constructed and would be demolished at Karen's expense. She was ordered to pay over $2 million in damages, legal fees, and restoration costs. And to top it all off, she was facing potential criminal charges for harassment and destruction of property. Karen, who had entered the courtroom with her usual air of confidence, sat frozen. Her empire had crumbled before her eyes. She had tried every dirty trick in the book, legal loopholes, fake documents, manipulation, even intimidation, but in the end, truth had won. The fallout was immediate. Her once loyal allies vanished. The real estate investors she had conned into buying the cottages turned on her, each of them suing her for fraud. The town, once divided, now saw her for the liar she was. With her accounts frozen and no way to pay her debts, Karen was forced to sell her own home. The very community she had tried to dominate now watched as she packed up and left town in disgrace. Ethan, meanwhile, stood on his newly reclaimed land, watching as the cottages were dismantled, piece by piece. It was over. The land, his family's land, was his again. But beyond just winning a legal fight, he had proven something greater. When you stand firm against corruption, when you refuse to be bullied or intimidated, justice will prevail. As the seasons changed, Ethan worked to restore the land, replanting trees where the cottages once stood. Neighbors who had once believed Karen's lies now came forward to help, eager to be part of something good after so much deceit. In the end, his battle had united the community, not divided it. He had won. But the real question was, how many people like Karen get away with this every day? Have you ever been forced to fight for what was rightfully yours? Or worse, have you ever been trapped in a battle against someone like Karen? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.